There's something most men never understand about compliments. They think it's about the words. They think if they say something nice, something flattering, something smooth, she'll feel something. She'll lean in. She'll soften. She'll open up. But she doesn't. And the man walks away confused, maybe even embarrassed, wondering what went wrong, wondering why the same words that worked for someone else fell completely flat when he said them. Here's what no one told you. A compliment doesn't land because of what you say. It lands because of who you are when you say it. It lands because of the weight behind it, the stillness, the lack of need, the quiet certainty that you meant every word, and you don't need her to respond to feel good about saying it. That's the difference. And that's why certain compliments hit completely different when they come from older men. Not because older men are better with words, not because they've memorized some secret script, but because they've stopped performing. They've stopped chasing reactions. They've stopped needing approval dressed up as connection. When a younger man gives a compliment, it often comes wrapped in expectation. There's a tension behind it, a slight lean forward, a subtle need to be validated for being generous with his words. And she feels it. She always feels it. But when an older man speaks, one who's grounded, who's been through loss, who's stopped trying to impress, the compliment doesn't feel like a hook. It feels like a mirror. It feels like being seen. And that's what changes everything. This isn't about age on a birth certificate. This is about emotional depth. Composure. A man who's done enough inner work that his words carry gravity instead of desperation. Most men never hear this explained clearly. So they keep saying the right things the wrong way. They keep giving compliments that sound like requests. And they keep wondering why she smiled politely, but didn't feel a thing. If you stay with this, all the way through, you'll understand something that most men go their entire lives without grasping. You'll understand why certain words from certain men create an emotional shift that she cannot fake, cannot force, and cannot forget. Let's talk about what's actually happening beneath the surface. When a woman receives a compliment from a man who is emotionally grounded, something shifts in her nervous system. Not her ego, not her vanity, her nervous system. She feels safe. She feels seen without being hunted. Most compliments women receive are disguised negotiations. A man says something nice, and underneath it there's a silent question. Do you like me now? Will you give me your attention? Did I earn something? She's heard it 1,000 times. From strangers. From co-workers, from men in her DMs who think flattery is a strategy. And every single time, her guard goes up. Not because the words were wrong, but because the energy behind them was transactional. Now imagine the opposite. A man looks at her calmly, not scanning, not performing. He's relaxed. His voice is steady. He says something specific, something that tells her he actually noticed who she is, not just what she looks like. And then he moves on. He doesn't wait for a reward. He doesn't linger. He doesn't need her to blush to feel like the moment meant something. That stillness, that emotional independence, is what makes the compliment land like nothing she's felt before. She won't always show it in the moment. She might even seem unaffected. But hours later, lying in bed, replaying the day, that's the moment she remembers. That's the voice she hears again, because it didn't ask anything from her. It simply gave. And women remember what was given freely far longer than what was given with conditions. This is the foundation. This is what separates a forgettable compliment from one that enters her chest and stays. It was never about finding the perfect line. It was about becoming the kind of man whose words don't need volume to be heard, whose presence doesn't need performance to be felt. And that's where most men get it wrong. They rehearse. They calculate. They try to be impressive. But the most powerful compliment a man can ever give is the one he almost didn't say out loud because he didn't need to. He just chose to. That choice, free from need, full of awareness, is what hits different. And now you're ready to hear what those compliments actually are. The first compliment that hits different when it comes from a grounded, emotionally mature man is this. When he tells her that her mind is interesting, not her face, not her body, not anything she's heard 100 times before from men who are only looking at the surface. When a man pauses mid-conversation and says something like, "The way you think about that is genuinely interesting," it does something that no amount of flattery ever could. It tells her she was heard, not observed, not admired from a distance. Heard. Most women are used to being seen. Very few are used to being understood. And when a man, especially one who carries himself with quiet composure, reflects back something about her thinking, not her appearance. It reaches a deeper layer, a layer she rarely lets people access. She doesn't respond with excitement. She responds with stillness because something inside her just opened, and she wasn't expecting it. The second compliment is when he acknowledges her strength without making it the whole picture. Something like, "You carry a lot more than people realize." That sentence, spoken calmly, without dramatizing it, does something most men don't understand. It tells her she doesn't have to perform strength around him. It tells her he sees the effort behind her composure, and it gives her, maybe for the first time in a long time, permission to exhale. Women who are constantly strong rarely hear that their strength is seen. They hear they're intimidating. They hear they're too independent. But they almost never hear a man simply say, "I see what you carry." When that happens, her walls don't go up. They go quiet. The third compliment that shifts something inside her is when a man notices something she changed, something small, and mentions it without making it a production. Maybe she cut her hair slightly. Maybe she's wearing something different. Maybe her energy shifted that day, and he says it simply, "That looks good on you." Or, "Something's different today. I like it." Not because he's trying to score points, but because he was actually paying attention. And attention, when it comes without pressure, is one of the most disarming things a woman can experience. She's not used to being noticed without being wanted. And when those two things separate, when a man notices without needing, it creates a kind of emotional trust that builds faster than any grand gesture ever could. The fourth compliment is one most men are afraid to give. It's when he tells her that her presence is calming, not exciting, not electric, not dramatic. Calming. Something like, "I don't know what it is, but I feel settled around you." Most men are afraid this sounds boring, that she'll think he's not passionate enough. But here's the truth. Women who are constantly surrounded by intensity, by noise, by emotional chaos, they are starving to hear that they bring peace to someone, that their energy doesn't have to be loud to matter, that simply being in their presence is enough. And when a man says that, without rushing, without filler, without turning it into a pickup line, she feels something she can't explain. She feels wanted in a way that doesn't drain her. She feels like she doesn't have to earn the moment. The fifth compliment hits in a place most women protect fiercely. It's when he tells her that she doesn't have to try so hard around him. This one is less about words and more about what's underneath. It's about a man seeing through her effort, the curated personality, the careful answers, the mask she wears in most rooms, and saying, "You can drop that here." He doesn't say it with superiority. He doesn't say it like he's unlocking her. He says it like someone who understands what it's like to carry a version of yourself that isn't fully real. And in that recognition, something mutual opens up. She may not trust it immediately, but she'll remember the man who made her feel like she didn't have to audition. These are not lines to memorize. These are truths to embody. And the only reason they hit different from an older, grounded man is because he's no longer performing when he speaks. He's no longer looking for her reaction to feel confident. He says what he sees, and then he lets the silence do the rest. That silence, the gap between his words and her response, is where attraction doesn't just spark, it breathes, it deepens, it becomes something she didn't expect, and she won't forget how that felt. The sixth compliment that changes things is one most men overlook because it sounds too simple. It's when he tells her he respects how she handles things, not how she looks, not how she makes him feel, but how she moves through the world. Something like, "The way you handled that, I respect it." That word, respect, is one of the most underused words in the way men talk to women. Most men compliment beauty. Very few compliment character. And when a woman hears a man acknowledge the way she navigated a challenge, the way she stood her ground, the way she held herself together when things were falling apart, she doesn't just feel flattered, she feels recognized. There is a deep hunger in every strong woman to be seen not just for what she gives, but for what she survives. And when a man names that calmly, without making a show of it, she stores that moment somewhere safe, somewhere she returns to quietly, because it told her something rare, that he was watching, and not just when it was easy to look. The seventh compliment is one that very few men have the emotional range to deliver. It's when he tells her she makes him want to be better. Not in a desperate way, not in a way that puts her on a pedestal or burdens her with his growth, but in a way that shows her presence has impact, that being around her elevates something in him, something he can't quite name, and he's honest enough to say it. When a man says, "Something about you makes me want to do more with my life," it doesn't sound like pressure. It sounds like devotion, the kind that doesn't ask anything in return. And here's what most men don't realize. Women don't want to be worshipped. They want to matter. There's a difference. Worship puts her above you. Mattering puts her beside you. And when she hears that her presence genuinely affects a man's drive, his standards, his direction, without him losing himself in the process, she feels a pull she can't logically explain. It's not attraction built on chemistry alone. It's attraction built on emotional significance. And that's the kind that lasts. The eighth and final compliment is the most powerful one. And it's the one that almost no man says out loud. It's when he simply tells her, "I chose you, not because I needed someone, but because I wanted you specifically." This is not something said on a first date. This is not something said to impress. This is something that comes after time, after presence, after trust. And when it arrives from a man who is clearly capable of being alone, who doesn't need a relationship to feel whole, it changes something in her permanently. Because most women live with a quiet fear that they were chosen out of convenience, proximity, loneliness, timing. They fear they were the option that happened to be there, not the one who was deliberately, consciously wanted. So when a man who is grounded, who is emotionally whole, who has built a life he's proud of, looks at her and says, "I chose you, and I'd choose you again," she doesn't just feel loved. She feels safe in the love. She feels like it won't disappear the moment something easier comes along. And that sense of safety, that quiet, unshakable knowing that she is not a placeholder, is the emotional foundation that makes a woman stay. Not out of fear, not out of habit, but out of deep, voluntary devotion. Now here's the part most people miss. These 8 compliments are not techniques. They are not tools. You can't memorize them and expect magic. They only work, they only land with real weight when the man behind them has done the work, when he's stopped chasing, when he's stopped performing, when he's faced his own emptiness and built something real inside himself. Because a compliment from a hollow man sounds like noise, but a compliment from a man who knows who he is, that sounds like truth. And truth, spoken without urgency, without need, without decoration, is the most attractive thing a woman will ever hear. She won't always tell you. She won't always react, but she will remember. And that memory will shape how she sees every other man after you. That's not power over her. That's the kind of presence most men never develop, because they were too busy trying to be liked. You don't need to be liked. You need to be real. And when you are, the right words will come. Not because you planned them, but because you finally stopped pretending. If you've made it this far, something in this resonated with you. Not because it was exciting, not because it made you feel powerful, but because it finally made sense. You've probably spent a long time trying to figure out what to say, how to say it, when to say it. You've replayed conversations in your head, wondering where you lost her, wondering what the right line would have been, wondering if you were too much or not enough. Let me tell you something clearly. You were never the problem because you cared. You were never weak because you gave. You were never less of a man because you wanted to be close to someone and didn't know how. The problem was never your intentions. It was your positioning. You gave compliments that came from need, not from fullness. You said beautiful things, but your energy was asking for something back, and she felt that. Not because she was cruel, but because women are wired to detect emotional motive before they hear a single word. That's not a flaw in her, and it's not a flaw in you. It's a signal that the relationship you needed to build first was the one with yourself. Most men skip this step. They go straight to connection, straight to pursuit, straight to trying to earn love from someone else before they've ever sat alone in a room and felt okay with who they are. And when the love doesn't come, or when it comes and then leaves, they collapse, because they were building on a foundation that didn't exist yet. This is not about becoming cold. This is not about withholding affection or playing games with silence. Those are tactics, and tactics always expire. This is about arriving at a place where you can say something kind, something real, something vulnerable, and not need it to be returned. Where your sense of self doesn't rise or fall based on how she responds. Where you give a compliment the same way you breathe, because it's natural, not because you're hoping it buys you something. That's what maturity looks like in a man. Not age, not money, not control over others. Just a quiet, settled confidence that says, "I know what I bring, and I don't need to prove it." When you reach that place, something shifts. not just in how women respond to you, but in how you experience yourself. You stop scanning rooms for validation. You stop performing in conversations. You stop measuring your worth by how much attention you receive. And in that stillness, people begin to feel something around you that they can't quite name. It's safety. It's depth. It's the sense that you are not trying to take anything, and that makes them want to give you everything. This is especially true with women. A woman who feels emotionally safe around you will show you a version of herself she shows almost no one. Not because you tricked her, not because you used the right words at the right time, but because you became the kind of man who didn't need her walls to come down, and that's exactly why they did. The compliments we talked about, the ones that hit different, they're not the cause of attraction. They're the evidence of it. They're proof that a man has built something internal, something real, something that doesn't need to perform because it already knows its own value. You don't need 8 perfect lines. You need one honest life, a life where your words and your energy match, where your mouth and your posture tell the same story, where what you say to her is the same thing your silence already communicates. That alignment between who you are and what you express is the most magnetic thing a man can develop, and it has nothing to do with age, status, or looks. It has everything to do with the decision to stop pretending and start being. So here's the question I want to leave you with, and I don't want you to answer it right now. I want you to carry it with you into the next conversation, the next silence, the next time you feel the urge to chase. Are you still giving to be chosen, or have you finally become the kind of man who doesn't need to be? Sit with that. The answer will change everything.